home. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. Still hoping that you'll give us one of those little presets on your radio dial there, wherever you are, if you're not off in satellite or Howard Stern land. We've got an unbelievable week of sports here. I mean, obviously, the Ravens coming off a huge victory over the Buffalo Bills. We got baseball on the brain all week long. We have, and kind of the fun part is it's a little bit like Bruce Springsteen's Tunnel of Love. You go into that fun house, you don't know you don't know what you're going to get, and that's what makes it fun. But we're going to get at least two games here on Tuesday and Wednesday. Luke and I are going to talk about that next Friday. Allegedly, with rain, all of that weather, we would have an off day before an American League Championship Series. Therefore, I planned a crab cake tour on the 11th of October to celebrate Luke's birthday. He turns 29 all over again. And I am, of course, turning 29 all over again next weekend as well. October 11th will be at Pizza John's in Essex. It's all brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. I have these Raven scratch-offs. These have been the luckiest batch ever. I mean, people are yelling at me at Costas. I won $5. I won $7. I don't know if they won 7. I think it was a 5 and a 2. Somebody won 10 the other day. Somebody won 20 last week at Fadley's. I have the Raven scratch-offs. The Ravens have been scratching off pretty well the last 2 weeks, scratching off victories. We'll hope to see that happen again in Cincinnati. Our friends at Jiffy Lube Multi-Care, power Luke up, get him back and forth from Camden Yards to Owings Mills. He won't be in Owings Mills much this week if the baseball team holds up. As you know, I am banned because I'm a bad guy. I'm writing to David Rubenstein this week. It's my first letter to the new owner of the Orioles, asking him why he's behaving like the old owner of the Orioles. So I hope you read that. I hope you're on our WNST text service, 410-821-WNST. You text in join, and you're on. About 6,000 of you now on that. Hear it in Luke's voice when you hear it. And it is brought to you by Cole Roofing. I'm going to have you say Cole Roofing, and we're going to add that as a little audio attachment to that for Luke, because Luke is working hard, getting out things like wild card matchups and game times and 4 o'clock, 4:30, 4 o'clock. Get the babysitters for the kids, get the day off early from work. Come on downtown, meet me at Michi's for lunch, and get ready for quite a magic carpet ride here. Luca, how you holding up, man? Late night Sunday night, big victory. Chad Steele and Greg Bader are trying to Texas chainsaw you in half so I can have half of you in Owings Mills and half of you downtown. I mean, it's a big week for the Ravens. 2-2, taking a division game, one of the teams in the way. But I don't think there's going to be any oxygen, especially for you, as you said to me last week. It's playoff baseball, dude. I'm not worried about the Bills or the Bengals, and good for you, because I need you to focus this week.
Well, I mean, you can focus on that on Sunday, right? I mean, and it even plays out this week, especially if they advance to the division series. Then Sunday they have an off day, and you can watch the Ravens and the Bengals. So I think through the
Is
week,
that like your Deacon Jones speech on the 7th day? He rested and played football.
well, not resting, none of that for the time being. But there's the postseason for baseball. It's so unique. And I guess this applies for the NFL as well, because obviously, you can be as excited as you want, as confident as you want, and you have a bad 3 hours and it's over. But this is such an exciting time that you have 6 months that it builds to this. And specifically with the Orioles, I mean, we knew from May that they were going to be in the postseason. Now, we didn't know how rocky it would be in the second half of the season. But I think come the third week of May, and certainly by June, when they were 24 games over 500, you knew that this was going to be happening. You just didn't know, okay, division, wild card, what seed, all of that. So you have this build, and especially when you don't have a first round bye like the Orioles had last year. I mean, this can be over in 2 days, or we could be talking about this 2 weeks from now, or we could be talking about this a month from now, or 5 weeks from now, we're talking about a parade. I mean, that's what we're talking about here in terms of the range of outcomes. So it's very exciting. It's very nerve-wracking. If you haven't clipped your fingernails, you'll probably be okay, because there'll be plenty of nail biting as it pertains to starting Tuesday afternoon against the Kansas City Royals. But it's such an exciting time. And I think for baseball fans, especially, depending on how you feel about other sports, October baseball is just so much different because you're so programmed as a regular season baseball watcher that no single game, no individual game matters that much. As ugly as a loss is, well, you got a game tomorrow. And okay, that applies for Wednesday, if they have an ugly game Tuesday, okay, they have Wednesday, but then they're playing for their season. So it can end so quickly. And we saw this last year. As great as the Orioles were in the regular season, it was over just like that. So that can be a blessing if you're the upstart team, you're the underdog team, you're the team that's trying to overcome, say, a rough month of September, like the Orioles did until the last 5 days or so. Or you can be that team that kind of wilts under expectations. So we're going to find out a little bit about this team. You hope that all of the adversity that they went through, and I was talking about this back in July and August and September, Nestor. I said over and over, I can't guarantee it's going to be this October, but I said that everything they went through this season, I do think is going to benefit them in a big picture sense at some point. Now, it might be next year. It might be 2 years from now. I don't know. But I think it was important for this team to survive, so to speak, what they did. And, now they've got guys back other than Grayson Rodriguez and other than the guys that we knew were out for the year. But they got everyone else back. Jordan Westberg's back. Ramon Arias is back. They got the guys back in the bullpen. They got Heston Kjerstad back, who I assume will be a bat off the bench for them. So, now it's a matter of, hey, you get to roll the dice. You mentioned in a previous segment talking about Buck Showalter using the term pile diver. The other term that he always talked about is October is all about earning the right to get there, and then you roll the dice. I mean, you really don't know how. Of course, you want to play your best and put your best foot forward, but you just don't know because again, it goes back to baseball players, baseball coaches and managers, baseball media, baseball fans. We're all so conditioned to not make too much out of one game. And this is the exact opposite of that now, especially when you think back to when you had the wild card game. At least now it's a best of three at the very least. But I mean, it's beautiful, but it can be a nightmare too, because ask the LA Dodgers, who regular season wise, they have been the class of baseball for close to a decade now, right? Look how much October success they've had, or lack thereof. Short series, it can end very quickly. So I don't say that to scare anyone. It's how this works. And that's why it's both exhilarating and nerve-wracking as can be, because you just know that, gosh, you just have a bad day or two and it can be over just like that.
Those of you who've been following our journey around, I'm doing the Maryland Oyster Tour here. 26 oysters, 26 days, 26 ways for our friends at Liberty Pure. 1-800-CLEAN WATER, as well as Curio Wellness. I'm wearing the top. I'll have my orange top on Tuesday and Wednesday, and maybe Thursday as the Orioles play. Also, our friends at Jiffy Lube and Royal Farms putting us out on the road through this oyster tour and making things happen. This the hitting side of this, we've talked about the pitching and your concern, right? Your palpable concern about the bullpen. And I look at, Burns, Eflin, and let's say Kramer, Suarez, whatever that would look like on Thursday if they're playing for their lives, and who's still available and who gets beaten up early. So Suarez has to come in the fourth inning on Tuesday or what? Because every day you're playing Tuesday like it's game 7, kind of. You're like, it's the 8th inning. It's game 7. You got to win, got to win, got to win. You get that one under your belt. Now you got to win 1 out of 2, right? But you don't want to come back to the ballpark at 4:30 on Wednesday in that game that you have to win to keep your season alive. One of these two teams is going to have that. All 4 of these series, San Diego, all the way around. I mean, my God, the Braves and the Mets playing 2 games on Monday, and the Diamondbacks trying to figure what plane they're getting on to go to Milwaukee and what. I mean, the circumstance the Orioles have, other than what Barry Bloom said a couple weeks ago, which is, I don't want the Yankees to have 4 days off. It'll screw up their pitching. It screws up everybody's pitching. Well, let the Dodgers and the Phillies worry about that. Let the Indians and the Yankees worry about that this week. And I want to talk format with you a little bit, because we are going to New York if we win, not to Cleveland, Houston, because the reseeding and the way it works, it's just this is their format. And I want to give you some oxygen on that. But before we do that, I want to give love this weekend, as I was on my oyster tour, going out into Catonsville and over to that place where they brew that Baltimore blonde that has nothing to do with Baltimore. All my old newspaper people got together. I saw some of your colleagues. I saw Charles Walker and Jamison Hensley. I found that Jamison Hensley, don't tell him I said this. You won't see him this week anyway, and Lord knows I won't see him. He listens to WNST. He admitted this to my senior editor, Christian Zhang, who took me out for my 21st birthday beer, and we're now all old farts. But all the old sports writers got together over the weekend. I want to play this game with you, even though Mike Marlowe wasn't there and he was always the editor of the playoff section. I didn't have any playoff sections when I worked at the paper. I was there from 84 to 92. We didn't get to produce any playoff sections. But we did have those season preview sections we did where Earl Weaver was coming back to manage the Orioles in the 80s and whatnot. And when we did that, Jim Henneman or Ken Rosenthal, or if it was in the Morning Sun, it was Richard Justice or Tim Kirkshin or Buster Olney, any number of my colleagues who all worked at the Sun and the News American, a rich tradition. Schmuck would have been writing a little column, or Eisenberg or Litwin or whoever it would have been. But if you were my beat reporter, and I did stand up for you, Rich Scher and I had a long conversation about Kevin Byrne and his thoughts about our coverage. And I looked around the room at all. Kevin Van Valkenburg was there, by the way. So it was a Kevin Eck, a lot of Kevins, all the Kevins were there. My dear friend Andy Noble retired, and the Mets still suck, and they still haven't won a championship. 36 years at the paper, Andy, and they still haven't won. But I was shocked at how many people listen to our station, listen to our words and all this. If I put together a preview section for the playoffs, and I can break out my 79 and my 83 from the Evening Sun and News American, because I was such a newspaper head, and you know that. That's why our breaking news tech service is so awesome, because I believe in breaking news. 410-821 WNST. Thank you, Cole Roofing. But I want to do this with you and do a preview, section preview, you and me, like pretend that we're at the news. Dude, here's what we can do. We could pretend that we're at Sports First. You were born the first week Sports First launched. And a year later, you killed it, 84. Also took our football team. My God, you barely got to see a couple Colts games in your childhood 41 years ago. 41 years ago this week. My God. You and the Orioles World Series trophy are the same age. You're only 2 weeks older than that. So let's go through this, because you've talked pitching. We'll talk Reagan's Lugo Waka, right? And their bullpen. And thankfully, it doesn't look like the 2014 Royals bullpen, which I still have some night frights and some sweats about. And I know Buck Showalter does as well. So does Adam Jones and Markakis, all those guys, right? I mean, he was gone at that point. But I would just say this for the hitters. You said before the trading deadline, before Elias was dealing for bullpen help and dealing for Eloy Jimenez and figuring out Slater and all the injuries and Westberg and Mateo, all that happened. You're like, if they win the World Series or if they're successful in October, it's going to be because their stars are stars. Mahomes and Kelsey in the playoffs, you go home with Taylor Swift, you take the trophy home with you, I look at this with this team and I see guys who are in the hall of potential, in the hall of very good for now. Rookies of the years, ones that have made it, cakes that have baked in the case of Gunnar Henderson. Rutschman was a cake that baked and then flopped. It's more of a souffle at this point. We're trying to figure that out, right? And we've been through the Weeders in the market, and we've been through this 10 years ago where that team could have won a World Series, right? And I would defer to you on the night when we saw the rat as big as me in the Bronx when they lost that game 5. That night there, if that had gone the other way, and you talk about roll the dice, Peter Angelo showed up, that's one time I think you were in a room with him, right? Was that night in the Bronx after they lost, and I waited for you out on that park bench outside because I'm a bad guy. I can't think of anything that offends me more than being called a bad guy by Greg Bader and the Baltimore Orioles. So, dear David Rubenstein, you're going to get my shot banning me from your press box on behalf of Peter Angelos. It's disgraceful. But nonetheless, that was their best shot. 14, they went to the American League Championships, but they just weren't the best team. They had a real chance in 12 for me to navigate the next couple of weeks if they could have, because they had a little bit of depth in their pitching with Chen and Gonzalez. They had a little bit of that, and Machado didn't know who he was yet. And, I wanted to see another 24 at bats the next series from those guys, right? They didn't get there, but I felt like that was a potential team. And you always talk about the Miss Billy Cundiff kick that we always talk about while Harbaugh sat on the sideline, not knowing how many timeouts. By the way, 2 timeouts in a row the other night. I have the video of him yelling, I have that, so I'll use that. We'll meme that up when I learn how to make memes. I don't really know how to make those, or GIFs or GIFs. Are they GIFs or GIFs? I don't know. I have to ask the Ocean Callings people. But let's go player by player. All right. So the stars to be stars. Let's start with a profile of who Gunnar Henderson is.
I mean, he's one of the best players in the American League. I mean, Gunnar Henderson was their best player, most valuable player. He was arguably the most valuable player in the American League over the first 3 months of the season because Aaron Judge didn't slept through April inexplicably when you go back and look at his numbers in the month of April. But I mean, he's their best player, and he had a good month of September after a not so great August, and they need Gunnar to be great. I mean, look, and unless you're counting on the Ryan O'Hearns of your lineup, and Ryan O'Hearn, we've seen him hit a couple long balls recently. That's been good to see. But Gunnar's your best player, and I mean, he's the most dynamic player they have, and that's taken nothing away from anyone else. But he had a near 900 OPS. He had 37 home runs at 92 runs driven in. Batted 280, had a 364 on base percentage, slugged 529. I mean, what more do you want? Needs to be a little steadier defensively, sure, but we also see him make great plays. And I've reminded you over and over, go look how many errors Cal Ripken made in his age 23 season, his age 24 season. It's a similar story. I think Gunnar Henderson is going to be a heck of a shortstop before it's all said and done. But you need it, just like any position, you got to be steady. You got to be sharp. You got to be on point. So, I mean, what's really great about this series, and this is where in some ways it's unfortunate because it won't have as much oxygen because it's a best of three no matter what. Either team wins, this thing's over in 3 games or 2 games.
You don't get big stats here. You're going to get 8, 10, 12 at bats tops, right? Like literally.
Right. But we're going to get Gunnar Henderson and Bobby Witt Jr. I mean, you're talking about, the 2 best young shortstops in the game. I mean, 2 of the best young players in the game at any position of what they do. I mean, that's fun. I mean, that's cool when you think about that. And like I said, I mean, Bobby Witt in the second half, if Aaron Judge doesn't exist, we're talking about Bobby Witt being the overwhelming MVP of the league. Like, no questions asked MVP of the league, except Aaron Judge exists, and that's his problem. So, but, with Gunnar, I mean, I think, they played around with the idea of him hitting 3rd or 4th, and I think in an ideal world, yeah, you probably would have him hitting 2nd or 3rd, but for this team, this year, as it's presently constructed, he makes sense in the leadoff spot. And if you notice, when they put him back in the leadoff spot, that's when he got himself back, hitting the long ball and doing the things that Gunnar Henderson does. So, look, I mean, shortstop, like I said, both these teams, I mean, A-plus shortstops, A-plus shortstops. I mean, that's exciting when you're talking about guys that are 23 years old. I mean, that says a lot for the future of both of these franchises. Bobby Witt under contract, the Orioles will be talking about it as soon as the season ends, whether it's this week or early November. We're going to be talking about it again. When are you signing Gunnar Henderson? When are you signing Gunnar Henderson? Are you trying to extend him? But because he's that special of a talent.
Let's keep going through this. And I want to say Rutschman next. And I want to, let you profile him, but you might want to do Santander, and you might want to do Westberg, or you might want to do Cals. I don't know where you want to go, but I think we need to talk about Rutschman in relationship to what he needs to be, what we think he is. And in my sort of flippant emails, my dear Rubenstein, and how I'm feeling about journalism, this is the point where these players, and especially with Rutschman, if you're going to be that generational guy and you're going to get that $200 million deal, and Mr. Rubenstein's going to have to step up and out in a way financially to show what they're doing here when they hire Canopy to spend the $600 million, all the things are going to have off the field that have to do with the business of the team. This is where these stars become stars, and tough decisions have to be made for who you keep, who you don't keep, who we can sign, whether Corbin Burns is going to be an Oriole next year and at what cost, or, whether he's this year's Blake Snell, I don't know. And how many starts Corbin Burns gets this time of the year versus, because that's how you get to be a star. Is you make 6 starts in October, not 1. Even if you make 1 great one, next day you lose, Kramer stinks the next day and you're out. This is treacherous for all these guys, their money, their careers, their reputation. It's such a small sample size. But Rutschman and the gang, and I'll let you pick. You can pick the order because I just, if I had to pick it, we'd have to talk about Rutschman, and then I think Santander, and then next Westberg and Kauser as we go through, and Mullins, and right. I mean, Mountcastle. I mean, they got a lot of players. Any of these guys, I'm not going to sing the Oriole Magic song, but I might before the segment's over. But every night there's a different star. That's the magic of Oriole baseball. Doesn't need to be all these guys. It needs to be one or two of these guys over the next 2 or 3 days, so that we're talking about hopping a bus along the Hudson River line on Saturday. Maybe you and I are up in the Bronx. I would pay $18 for a playoff ticket in New York. I guess I would go up with you and get a bed. And they got good food up there. I'll introduce you to some good Korean places. We can watch the ball game on Sunday. That sounds fun, doesn't it? Like a little ALDS in the Bronx this weekend. Got to get there. Rutschman. Let's start with him.
Well, tale of two halves. I still have my questions and suspicions that he's not healthy because he has been that bad in the second half. Anything you've heard about Adley Rutschman in terms of slumping in the second half has most likely been understated. Nestor, I'm not saying this to pick on him. Among qualified hitters, he's been one of the worst 5 to 10 hitters in baseball in the second half. I mean, it's that bad. He's been completely lost. I mean, you look at the numbers since the All-Star break. Adley Rutschman is batting 207 with a 282 on base percentage and a 303 slug. I mean, he's been replacement level. Since the beginning of July, he's been replacement level. James McCann had a better half at the plate. If this were blind names,
I mean, I can pull Mendoza's splits up, and it's seriously, right? Like we
and
thought that
that's
Mendoza would
why
make fun of that or whatever, but whatever that Mark Belanger thing is, I was gonna eat some peach cake here. Thank you. But
I mean,
yes.
I don't say this to be flippant or to pick on the guy. I don't dislike Adley Rutschman. The Adley Rutschman that we saw from about 3 weeks into his major league career until the end of June was exactly what he had been, a two-time All-Star, a guy that belongs in the top two spots in your batting lineup, in your batting order, and hits for pop, draws walks, gets on base, hits doubles, drives in runs. I mean, nothing about him to dislike other than, okay, well, he's slow. He's a catcher. Imagine that, right? But he's been completely lost. I mean, this is going to sound a little strange, Nestor, and you could say maybe you shouldn't say this because there would be more hope then for him snapping out of it and having a big October. Part of me almost hopes that he is dealing with an injury. That's how bad he's been in the second half. I mean, this isn't a slump. He's been one of the worst players in baseball, worst qualified hitters in baseball in the second half of the season. His profile wouldn't warrant playing every day. That's how bad he's been offensively. So that's where I say in a big picture sense, I'm hoping we find out 3 days after the season ends or 2 weeks after the season ends, whenever that is, whether that's this week or in November 3rd, that we find out that, Adley Rutschman's been dealing with this and this maybe, so it's just, it's perplexingness because he's been that good. He was that good for his first 2+ calendar years in the major leagues, and to struggle to this degree, Gunnar Henderson struggled in August, but go back and look at what Gunnar hit in the month of August. It wasn't so bad that you're questioning whether he should drop out of the leadoff spot or he should be benched for a few days. I mean, that's how bad Rutschman has been at the plate in the second half. So if he is healthy, then you hope that maybe the light switch does flip on here in this on this stage in these circumstances, because what he's capable of being. But again, you've been that bad, you've struggled to that degree for that long, 3 months. I have a hard time believing that he's 100% healthy, because if he is, then boy, off-season priority number one might be you got to fix Adley Rutschman, because that's how bad he's been in the second half of the season at the plate. Again, the numbers don't lie. I mean, for to be such a prolific player and to struggle to the degree that he has, like I said, I mean, we're probably going to see him on game one. Here's my prediction for you. If someone listening to this right now, maybe the lineup will be out when they're listening closer to first pitch, but it's a lefty on the mound, Cole Reagans. Corbin Burns has, not that he hasn't had Rutschman catch him, but he's had James McCann catch him quite a bit. I mean, James McCann's going to catch, and I'm guessing Adley Rutschman's going to be the DH. But the saving grace there is Adley is better from the right side, or has been better from the right side this year. But man, I mean, again, look at the second half numbers. James McCann's had a better second half with the bat than Adley Rutschman has. So you can tell my angst here. I mean, it's because I'm just so perplexed, and
I think he's hurt.
It
and I
doesn't
think
make
that,
sense
that,
to
that
me
foul tip
unless
on June
he's
27th that we've seen has affected him.
Or remember he had a back issue a while back that he missed a couple games as well. Or hey, we see this all the time in football, and it can happen in baseball as well. A core muscle issue, a sports hernia issue, something like that, where it's not so debilitating that you can't play. But boy, is it debilitating in terms of being the best version of yourself. Again, the numbers have been so bad for so long for a guy who was so good over his first 26 months in the major leagues, calendar months in the major leagues, that it just doesn't make sense to me that he's fully healthy and this is just a quote slump. That it's gone on way too long to think it's just that.
All right, let's go down here. Santander, Westberg, Mullins. Where do you? I mean, guys, 30-30 guys. Santander is what he is this year too, and I think the fans are a little concerned. Like, all right, you're not going to pay Santander the way they didn't pay Nelson Cruz a generation ago or whatever it is, and say take those home runs, take whatever that is elsewhere for whatever $80 million he's going to get over the next 3 or 4 years, right? And where would that pop come from next year if he's not here? In the same way that if Corbin Burns is one and done, starts a game here, and we don't get to New York over the weekend and whatever, there is a little bit of, you might be seeing Corbin Burns' last start. You might be seeing the last train here for some of these guys that even if they win the World Series, they'll be worth more money, I guess, to some degree, right, for all of these guys. But they are playing for big money, big stakes with just a couple of at-bats and a couple of pitches, really, on Tuesday for Burns. Team's going to change. We already had Mullins 1 foot out of here 6 months ago, right? And Hayes turned out to be the guy that got tapped on the shoulder and led away from the Bachelor Garden. But things are going to change, and things change quickly. And this is the time of the year where I remember Billick said at Super Bowl 35, get a look at each other. It's the last time you're going to see each other like this. That's kind of the way this thing's going in that way. But I'm wondering, Santander, Mullins, sort of veteran guys, look, Kerstadt, Cowser, Westbrook, they're here to stay. Some of these other people are playing for big stakes and have a real stake in the hearts of Mountcastle too, Oriole fans.
Yeah, I mean, this was always going to be the awkward time period. We talked about this before the season even started. And then you get into, like Austin Hayes, for example, got off to such a bad start. Colton Cowser had that big, monster 2.5 weeks in April, and he was a starting player from that point on. Now we can debate, whether Colton Cowser would benefit from resting against certain lefty starters, things like that. But I think we feel pretty confident he's going to be a starting outfielder for them for the next 4 or 5 years at the very least, right? It feels that way. And Santander, that's the pressing one because he's a free agent, right? He's going to hit the market if they don't re-sign him. It's complicated because I'm not opposed to re-signing him. At the same time, what's it going to take to do it? I'm certainly not enthusiastic about giving him a 5 or 6 year deal. I don't know how he's going to age as a player as well as he played this year. My goodness, he was 40 plus home runs, right? For first time an Oriole done that since Trumbo 8 years ago. But
wow, say that
how
name
does his
again?
profile age in terms
say
of
Trumbo again? Wow. Man, I forgot
Trumbo,
about that.
Yeah, Trumbo in 2016, right?
There you go, baby.
47 home runs, yeah. But you look at, and they re-signed him, and that didn't turn out so well, right? So, part of it is, hey, he had a great contract year. Good for him. He's going to get paid by somebody. But I'm open to it. I'm not opposed to re-signing Anthony Santander, but how much, how long? And I think what hurts from an Orioles perspective here in terms of the decision making is the year that Heston Kjerstad ended up having with, it really felt like he was starting to hit his stride offensively when he got beamed, right? I mean, ends up on the concussion list, comes back, wasn't right, symptoms returned, he's back on the list, missed most of the summer. That was not just because of his potential. That was such an important information gathering period for the Orioles, I think, in trying to evaluate him and what he is. I mean, what is Heston Kjerstad right now? I'm not giving up on him, let's be clear. But if he had had a monster second half, you might have said, you know what? I can try to sign Anthony Santander at my price, and if that doesn't work out, I feel really good about Heston Kjerstad. But I don't think anyone can say that with any level of anything that isn't hopes and prayers and based on his prospect ranking, at one point in time. So that's where it's tough. But Santander is the middle of their lineup. Look, has he been a little more feast and famine at times over the last couple months, where if he's not hitting home runs, he's not doing a whole lot? Yeah, but you could say that about just about anyone in this lineup. We talked about that with this lineup just being all or nothing a little bit too much over the last 2 to 3 months. We've seen that. So look, he's going to be hitting third or fourth. I mean, I think that's clear. Left left-handed or right-handed, right? I mean, switch hitter doing what he can do. I mean, it's very valuable. We'll have plenty of time to talk about what happens when this ends, but yeah, you're going to need Anthony Santander to hopefully hit a couple of long balls for you. Hopefully more than a couple if they're playing deep into the month. So you have him. You mentioned Mullins. I think he's such an interesting case because, yeah, if you had asked in June, you would have said, oh, well, he's probably going to be non-tendered. I mean, because he struggled to that degree. But I think what you saw, first of all, we have to recognize what he's become. He's a platoon bat now. I mean, you really don't want him starting against left-handed starters. We have a couple years now. He's far enough removed from when he hit the way he did against lefties in his 30-30 year to say that's the aberration. That's not what you should expect. So that said, I'm not ready to just non-tender him either. So I think you keep Cedric Mullins around for another year, and you're hoping he can have a good month. I mean, he had a good second half. I mean, he was for as much as we were talking about him potentially being sent to the minors, for goodness sake, fans were talking about that. We talked about not saying that was likely, but had to acknowledge it was possible. He was doing that poorly. Second half of the season, he batted 266, 374 on base, 457 slug. He had 9 home runs. He stole some bases, drew some walks, cut down on the strikeouts a little bit. But the reason why he was able to do that, or part of the reason why, was they started to limit his starts against left-handed pitching. So, that's the one thing that that is tough when they go up against a left-handed starter like Cole Reagans, for example, or take your pick of any other lefty they might see if they advance deeper into the postseason, is what do you do with your outfield there? Because, okay, Santander is fine and right, but, what are you doing with Mullins? Does that mean Kowser's playing center and Mullins sits? Okay, but, do you really really like your other options out there? I mean, Heston Kjerstad's left-handed, right? I mean,
well, this is where Hyde's going to have these decisions
so
in a small test tube here over the next couple of days, of saying what matchups do you like, where are you going? McCann's going to get at bats, in the right. So I don't know what their best lineup is, because it's a little bit of a whack-a-mole on a daily, right? And whatever decisions that have been made the last 60 or 90 days haven't been the right ones, because Rutschman hasn't hit, and guys slumped, and guys got hurt, and you're playing with Austin Slater and Emmanuel Rivera and guys that weren't even on the team.
Yeah.
So I just think these next couple of days, it's a bright spotlight. I mean, ask Buck Showalter about leaving Zach Britton in the bullpen in Toronto. He's still thinking about that. So it's tough, and there's all these moving parts, and there's a reason to say, well, I like Mountcastle in this situation, or I like O'Hearn in this situation, or I like this guy's bat, or I don't want him against left-handers, I want him against right-handers. But it's all going to get magnified the next couple of days, because I think to both of our points, to be kind to all of these players, everybody's contributed. You know what I mean? Everybody's had a moment. I mean, even if it's James McCann's valor, right? I mean, everybody's had a moment. Everybody's had a big hit, a big home run. Everybody's made a big play. Everybody's thrown the ball into the dugout as well, right? Everybody has struck out with runners in scoring position. I promise you, everybody on
Yeah.
the team has done that. That just can't be the story the next couple of days. That's all.
Well, I mean, if it is, then they're going home, right? I mean, it's that simple. And look, everything that we're saying here applies to the Kansas City Royals. It applies to the Houston Astros, who are more experienced than anyone in this American League field, anyway. It applies to the Detroit Tigers. It's going to apply to the Yankees and Cleveland. When we get to the division series, whichever matchup, the Orioles, if they win, will play the Yankees, and the winner of the other wild card series will go to Cleveland. So, I mean, everyone deals with that. What we're talking about with the Orioles is not exclusive to them. I mean, it's the same pressure. It's the same short series. It's the same stakes. I mean, you've got to be on your P's and Q's. I mean, you made mention of Emmanuel Rivera. Hey, that guy swung the bat well. I mean, if you're talking about the sixth inning, and my, game one's a bad example because they're obviously facing a left-handed starter, so O'Hearn's presumably not going to be in the lineup because he rarely ever starts. Rarely ever gets at bats against lefties, let alone starts against one. But game two, when Seth Lugo's pitching, they go to a lefty, and suddenly O'Hearn's due up. Emmanuel Rivera might be the first guy off the bench. I mean, he swung the bat well for them. I mean, over the weekend, I get it. The games weren't the highest stakes, but Emmanuel Rivera over the last, since he's joined the Orioles, I mean, he swung the bat well. In the second half, he batted 313. He hit what, 4 home runs for them. I mean, look at his OPS. I get it; it's a small sample, but if you're looking for that, every night there's a different star candidate to maybe be Rick Dempsey or Kiko Garcia or someone like that, where you say, oh my gosh, it might be Emmanuel Rivera. Who knows? So, point is, whoever it is, I mean, they've got to rise to the occasion. And like I said, with this, they're better equipped now to handle a lefty starter, having Westberg back, having Arias back in the mix, even though Arias generally over the last couple of years has done better against right-handed pitching. But, that is an issue just beginning with the outfield, because you have Mullins and you have Colton Cowser. I I don't really want to give Austin Slater at bats if it were me, because okay, maybe in the past he's hit lefties well. Go look at his splits this year. He hasn't hit lefties. Austin Slater had a decent couple weeks for the Orioles not long after he was acquired. He hasn't done anything with the bat since then. So you're kind of trying to weigh, when you have these platoon options, you're trying to weigh, okay, what's going to optimize our lineup, but defense matters too. So that's where you say, you know what? Even though I don't love him going up against Cole Reagans, I probably want Cedric Mullins' defense in center field, and I want Cowser's defense in left field. And okay, Mullins is going to have to hit ninth in that scenario, or eighth. So be it. But I mean, this is what you have to juggle when you have some of these players that are a little more platoon dependent kind of players. So we're going to see. Again, they swung the bats well over the last week in the Bronx and over the weekend in Minnesota, the way they, were resting a couple guys here and there, but for the most part, their regulars played. You hope that Jordan Westberg has enough at bats under his belt. I mean, at this point in time, we've seen some hits. He didn't put up monster numbers over the last week, but you said it. It was September training, right? It was September training for him and Arias and Jacob Webb and Danny Coulomb and Heston Kjerstad. I mean, go down the list of guys that have come back. So we're going to see. But yeah, I mean, we know the potential is there. We saw this team first 3 months of the season, most home runs. They were leading the way in slug and OPS. And yeah, they didn't walk a whole lot, but they hit a bunch of home runs, a bunch of doubles. Can they find that again? Because if they don't, I'm guessing their pitching in its totality, once you get beyond Corbin Burns and beyond Zach Eflin and you get into the bullpen, I'm guessing their pitching isn't going to be so dominant, so elite, that they're going to be a team that's going to be able to win scoring 2 or 3 runs. I'm guessing they're going to need to do more than that. And hey, that's the challenge, because you get to October, what do we always talk about? Pitching, pitching, pitching in a general sense. So that's why I kind of default back to not being as confident about their pitching depth. That's why, yeah, they better score runs. They better hit like they did the first half of the season. If they do, then I like their chances going up against anyone. If they don't, then it'll probably be a pretty short stay in the month of October. But hey, roll the dice and see what happens. There's no one dominant in the AL. We've said that for 3 months now. No one they should be afraid of. They just took 2 out of 3 from the Yankees. They split with the Astros back in August, even when the Orioles weren't playing all that well. They still did that. Who are you scared of? Doesn't mean they're going to win, but certainly there should not be an intimidation factor. And that's where you hope the experience of last year and all the stuff they went through the second half of the year. And I'm using a more polite word, stuff instead of another S word that they endured over the second half of the year. You're hoping that, that's callous them a little bit, to borrow a phrase from John Harbaugh. You're hoping that that helps these guys now as, they start fresh, they start anew. It's October. 0-0. And now it's a matter of get to 1-0, you get to 2-0 or 2-1, then you're moving on. And then you're talking about the New York Yankees after that.
Did you say Kiko Garcia? Did you say that on this program?
I did.
Do you know
I,
of my affinity and
it was
relationship with Kiko Garcia? Are you aware of this or no?
you've mentioned it in passing. You got to remember, Kiko's before my time. I was born in '83, but I read.
All right.
I know
I am celebrating. By the way,
heroes.
happy birthday to you. In case I forget, and the Orioles get eliminated, and we don't eat any cake, and you feel bad about things on Thursday. But happy birthday to you. We're going to be celebrating your birthday next week with Ravens scratch-offs in the Maryland Lottery. We're going to be at Pizza John's next week. It's all brought to you by our friends, as well as Jiffy Lube Multi-Care, powering Luke up to the ballpark, not powering me to Owings Mills, because we will not have coverage in Owings Mills this week because the PR departments of the Orioles and the Ravens have decided to blackball me or brownball me because, like Kiko Garcia, my people are Latin. 1979, Luke, I liked Kiko Garcia for... I don't want to be offensive to the deacon in you. For one goddamn reason, like Earl Weaver would say, had the same birthday. Kiko Garcia shares my birthday. It's next week, October 14th. So it's my birthday, and Kiko turns 71. I've had Kiko on the show one time, and this is anybody who loves Ray Bachman and wants to do nice things for Ray, and there's a GoFundMe for Ray. Ray's battling cancer right now. We love Ray. Ray on our birthday got Kiko Garcia to call in. And Kiko, I've only met Kiko Garcia one time in my life. And I always talk about Oriole Magic. This was the summer of 1979, and I always tell you I went to 31 games before Steve Trout threw the 6-hit shutout in August against Flanagan. And one night in June or July, you can go look it up. I think it was in June because I was off from school. School was out. The Orioles played the Red Sox. And Kiko got like 3 hits that night and it was the star of the game, beat the Red Sox. And I don't want to brag about what would then became a sponsorship with Crown Gasoline. Crown Gasoline sponsored me. Thank you, Henry Rosenberg, 30 years ago. Had really funny ads that Mark Rowe wrote about me taking a surfboard across the back river. Maybe I should vintage play some of those old commercials. But Kiko was a star of the game. And Luke, I was a junior Oriole. And I won the little thing with the junior Oriole thing to meet the player of the game after the game. And the player of the game was Kiko Garcia. And I got to go down one of the very few times I got to go to the bird feed room, which was really called the Hit and Run Club then, which was sort of a dank old little club meeting room under Memorial Stadium that they put some carpet in, had a little podium in the front, and I think they had a little buffet station over on the side. And I got to meet Kiko Garcia in summer 78. So we share the same birthday. So next week's my birthday. This week's your birthday. Next week, we're going to have our birthdays together. We're going to celebrate. We're going to have the pelts of the Yankees on the wall. Nasty Nestor, the other one. Garrett Cole, Judge, all of them. Be on our way to Cleveland, Houston, Detroit. I don't know, maybe somewhere. That'll be at Pizza John's next week. So a happy birthday to you. I'm trying to dream a little bit. You don't believe that when we get to Pizza John's, they're going to be playing baseball, right? You don't believe that?
Oh, I mean, look, I wish you'd stop painting it like that. I mean, like
you're worried about their bullpen. You just are. We haven't talked about it for half an hour. Yes,
I am. I just, and again, that doesn't mean they can't get to the division series. And look, by the way, if you look at the schedule, what October 11th, that would be between a potential game 4 and 5 of the division series.
My
So it
bad.
could be
Correct.
over. No, no, but I'm just saying that could be, boy, if we're talking about game 5 and we're getting ready to Orioles getting ready to go back to the Bronx, I mean, boy, that's going to be that would be
We have to get the show over and get out.
oh yeah, no question. But look, I mean, it comes down to what I said in a previous segment, and I don't want to belabor the point, and they certainly have capable arms. It's not as though it's the cupboard's bare, but I do wonder because, we're not talking about I think back to February 1st when they acquired Corbin Burns. We were dreaming about Burns, Bradish, Grayson Rodriguez, John Means. Now, they would have never acquired Eflin under that scenario. I think that's clear. But you wouldn't have needed quite as much depth with your bullpen. Now, where you're talking about, Burns, okay, check. Eflin, assuming that he's good and, what happened that last start against the Yankees, no big deal. He's been excellent for them. So check. Dean Kramer is your number 3. My goodness, 2 months ago, everyone was saying Dean Kramer didn't even belong in the rotation, let alone be in the number 3. So it speaks to where they are attrition wise. Albert Suarez, same deal with him. They were ready to put him in the bullpen. So it doesn't mean it can't happen, but my concern is those innings piling up in the bullpen, knowing that Danny Coulomb missed 3 months after elbow surgery. Jacob Webb missed a month with a sore elbow. Recently, Yennier Cano had forearm tightness and hasn't really looked right since coming back. It's just a lot of stuff there that, a lot of ifs and buts and, oh, I don't know about that. For me to say with confidence, I think they're going to be playing until the last week of October. But who the heck knows? What do I know? I mean, what do I know? Seriously. If everything happened the way you thought, this would all be boring. So see what happens. See, and I'll say this for everyone who tells me all the time, oh, they rely on the home run too much. If this team's playing in October, and this goes back to what I said, and take it a step further. It's because they're going to hit a boatload of home runs over the next 3 weeks if they're playing it in the World Series. I absolutely feel that. So see what happens.
I hope I have to rewind that and
this.
clip that, after they've hit 18 home runs in 14 games and, right? I mean, that's
what the Rangers did.
Yeah.
It's what the Rangers did last October. I mean, I get it. Evaldi and Montgomery were great, and their bullpen pitched lights out, but they hit a boatload of home runs. So, let's see what happens here. I mean,
Earl Weaver, let's go. 3-run home run.
He did that the entire first half.
Got to do it runners in scoring position.
But I'll leave you with this. Again, no matter that too, but no matter how confident or your lack of confidence, whatever your level is, let's enjoy this. This is the first time the Orioles have been in the playoffs back-to-back seasons since 96 and 97. It's the first time they had 90-plus win seasons back-to-back since 82 and 83. I mean, I get it. It's going to be disappointing if this doesn't go well and we're going to be lamenting, oh, if only Bradish or only Grayson Rodriguez or only Felix Bautista's elbowed in break last August. But this is still very rare territory. And that doesn't mean expectations won't continue to grow because they should, because they have that kind of a core. But let's also enjoy you mentioned it with all the regular season stuff. Enjoy the journey here because, my goodness, we've all suffered through so much lousy baseball for the better part of the last 40 years with very few exceptions. Right now, we're in the midst of one of those exceptions. So let's see what happens. Hey, I'd say this much, and I'll leave. I know I said I'd leave you with this. A year ago at this time, when we were previewing the start of the postseason, I don't think you and I mentioned the Arizona Diamondbacks. I don't think we mentioned them once. I don't think they were even talked about. And they were in the World Series 3.5 weeks later. Who the heck knows? That's why it's beautiful.
Well, the pitchers are getting chilled out in New York, and the bats are cooling off there as well. So they'll get their down days. We'll get back after it. Luke's got baseball all week. We got football all week. I hope you read my letter to David Rubenstein and take it seriously. I hope he takes it seriously because I'm 56 years old and I'm not going to stand for being treated like garbage by the new administration, which All I've ever done is love the team and supported the team and sent Luke on our behalf to cover the team professionally for you. Our text service is back up, 410-821-WNST. Just text join to that. You're back on. Big thanks to Cole Roofing. All of our sponsors putting us out on the road, the Maryland Lottery, Curio Wellness, Far and Daughter, making our oyster tour happen with our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions, 1-800-CLEAN-WATER, as well as Jiffy Lube getting Luke back and forth to Oriole Park at Camden Yards, and Royal Farms powering us up. We call them wise conversations. We're going to have a lot of those. I had a great day at Costas last week on the Crab Cake Tour with a fellow who wrote, guy named Kevin Leonard, who wrote a Capital Center retrospective book. You're going to be hearing a little bit of that this week. We just had great crab cake tours the last couple of weeks. The oyster tour is about to really get underway. You're about to see everything platform out at Baltimore Positive. Luke's writing, I'm writing, we're talking, we're watching, we're tweeting, we're out on social media. Make sure you're following Luke at Baltimore Luke. And make sure that if you enjoy what we do here on the internet or on the web or driving around, set a spot on your dial for AM 1570 and make sure you're on our text service for all the breaking news because it's back up and running. No longer in my voice, it's Luke's voice and Cole Roofing. Back for more. We're Baltimore Positive. Stay with us.